Hello viewers, welcome to this particular lecture on gymnosperm. In this lecture, I shall be talking about Cycas or a group of plants called Cycads. The objectives of this lecture are to know about the systematic position and distribution of Cycas, to know about the external morphology and of course the internal anatomy, to have a brief idea about the reproductive structures of this plant, and lastly to learn about their economic importance. The systematic position of Cycas is like this. The division is Gymnospermi, the class is Cycadophyta, order is Cycadalis, family is Cycadaceae and genus is Cycas. The plant is distributed in different parts of the world, but of course it has got some limitation in the distribution. They are found in Southeast Asia, South China, parts of peninsular India, particularly the southern stretch of east and west coastal region. It is also found in different parts of Latin America and southern part of North America. It is distributed to wide areas of Africa. Cycas has got a limited distribution. It is found in parts of Southeast Asia, South China, South India, South Japan and Australia, to a huge stretch of Xerophytic Africa, Southern Africa and parts of northern part of Latin America and southern part of North America. Cycad commonly is known as a living fossil because they were present at least 280 million years ago, and that was found in China, and they were most abundant plant in the Jurassic period, that is around 201 to 145 million years ago, and that particular age, that is why it is called the age of Cycad, and the plant is known as a living fossil because it originated such a time back and it still continues to exist. Coming to the morphological description of the plant body, the Cycas plant is just like a coconut plant. It has got a single round stem and there is the apical crown of leaves. And of course, the stem is protected by an armour of leaf bases, which actually is protecting the stem from external injury and also giving external mechanical support. The root normally is adventitious. It is not very strong, but this root has got colonization of blue-green algae like Anabaena or Nostoc, and the root gets deformed in the form of Coralloid like structure, and that is why the root is called Coralloid root. The leaves, as we can see, is having a compound leaf with a single rachis or leaf stalk, and the leaflets are needle-like, and this is actually protecting the plant from extreme environmental condition. The leaflets actually get matured in the form of circinate vernnation, that is, they are going inside and gradually open outside with maturity. Coming to the internal structure or the stem anatomy. Actually, the stem, the outside the epidermis is irregular because of the presence of leaf bases, and that is why epidermis is not continuous, or rather it is discontinuous in nature. There is a thick band of broad cortex with simple and girdle-like leaf traces. There are innumerable number of mucilage canal, and the cells also store starch grain. The central part of the vascular tissue is actually having open endark vascular bundle arranged in a ring, and they are separated from each other by a band of parenchymatous tissue called medullary rays. The central pith is large parenchymatous, and it is also having mucilage canals and starch grain. Coming to the anatomy of the root and the coralloid root. Actually, the young root, they have a typical dicot-like structure. The outermost layer is called the epiblema, and this is enclosing the parenchymatous cortex. The cortex is also formed of parenchymatous cells having tannin cells and mucilaginous canal. The innermost region of the cortex is called the endodermis, and the endodermis is provided with Casparian thickening, followed by a pericycle which is a thin cell, and they are actually having starch grain. The vascular tissue actually is showing radial vascular bundle, that is along the radii the xylem and phloem are present. Usually there may be 2 to 4 such radii, and that is why the vascular bundle is called diarch or tetrarch in nature, and it is not normally polyarch. The vascular tissue contains xylem, but the xylem is without trachea or vessel, and the pith is extremely reduced or absent. But when it comes to coralloid root, it is slightly more developed from the primary root, because the cortex shows colonization of algae or blue-green algae or cyanobacteria like Nostoc and Anabina, which is responsible for nitrogen fixation. And this region is actually called the palisade algal zone, which forms a distinct layer in the middle cortex. The rest of the structure almost the same, only if the stem starts with diarch, it may be triarch or tetrarch in nature with maturity. Coming to the leaf structure, as I have already said, the leaflet looks like a winged structure having a central vascular region and a peripheral projection. The upper and the lower epidermis is distinct in nature. The upper epidermis is having distinct palisade or cell layers which are longitudinal in nature, and the spongy parenchyma is below, which irregular parenchymatous cells, and this palisade and spongy is separated by a unique tissue called transfusion tissue, which is separating the two layers. And here also there is the typical centrifugal xylem and the phloem below. This vascular bundle is actually forming a distinct midrib, and this particular xylem sometimes may be centripetal in nature, sometimes may be centrifugal in nature, so it is variable xylem. And the presence of cambium actually is there, which shows that there is a possibility of slight secondary growth, but normally it is not there. This is the actual figure where we can clearly see that there is the upper and the lower epidermis with stomata, which is slightly sunken, and that is typically a xerophytic adaptation. We have the panel of palisade parenchymatous cells, which are longitudinal cells, irregular spongy parenchyma, and these horizontal cells are the transfusion tissue where the palisade and spongy parenchyma meets. We now come to the reproductive structure. As we can see here, the Cycas male cone is a oval structure having microsporophyll inside, and this microsporophyll will have microsporangia or the microspores, and normally it is at the center of the crown of leaves. If we can see that this is a single microsporophyll having a spinulated projection called apophysis, and these are the collection of microsporangia, and this microsporangia will have the microspores or pollen grains inside. Actually, the microspores represent the male gametophyte. We can see this is the typical male gametophyte or microspore having an outer exine and inner entine, and there are supportive cells called prothallal cells and also the tube cell and the generative cell. The tube cell produces the pollen tube and the generative cells produce the typically male gamete. We can see here that the development of the male gametophyte is divided into two parts, that is, one part is before pollination, another part is after pollination. So, before pollination the prothallal cell, antheridial cells are developed, and then the antheridial cell also develop into tube cell and the generative cell. So, in a typical 4-cell condition or typical 3-cell condition, there is pollination, and after pollination there will be the stalk cell and the body cell, and the body cell will produce the 2 sperms. So, basically the prothallal cell, tube cell, stalk cell, body cell, these are the cells present in a matured microspore of Cycas. And we can see here that this particular intine will come out as the pollen tube, and this pollen tube will develop from the blepharoplast, and then the pollen tube will be gradually getting inside with the help of the typical tube nucleus. It is followed by the 2 sperms which are having ring of cilia, so the sperms also can move on their own. Coming to the female reproductive structure, unlike male, Cycas is without any female cone. Instead, it is replaced by the Megasporophyll, which is a typical modified leaf-like structure having naked ovules attached to the base. And there may be 4 to 6 such ovules present, gradually getting matured. In fact, Megasporophyll structure is variable in different species. Like in case of Cycas revoluta, the upper part is irregularly projected. In case of Cycas pectinata, it just looks like a typical oval star-shaped structure. In case of Circinalis, Rumphei and Bedomi, it is an elongated structure with a typical apical projection or acuminate in nature. So, what we can see here, the Megasporophyll structure or the morphology is very important in identifying the species of Cycas. Coming to the development of the megaspore, actually the megaspore mother cells develop inside, and then there is the formation of the tetrad, out of which 3 will degenerate, 1 will produce the functional megaspore or the functional female gametophyte. At this point of time, there will be gradual nuclear division which will produce the endosperm, which is haploid in nature, followed by a vacuolation. This central vacuolation will be followed by gradual wall laying down, as a result of which there will be cellular endosperm produced along with the functional egg or ovum developing inside the megaspore. And when we talk about their germination or their development, so fertilization occurs inside the ovule, where the pollen grain will come at the tip of the ovule and the pollen tube will take in the male gamete. Then there will be fusion of the egg and the male gamete, and there will be development of the zygote. And this zygote will gradually develop into young embryo. It is an elongated oval structure, and then there will be free nuclear division and gradual elongation of the embryonal cell. This embryonal cell will ultimately develop into typically heart-shaped structure, but the upper part or the nutrient zone remains the same. So, what we can see here, the nutrition zone or the nutritive zone and the proper embryo is connected by a long tail-like structure, which is a zigzag-like structure, which typically is called the suspensor. And gradually this particular embryonal cell will develop into cotyledon, and finally it will develop into an adult plant, but this remains inside the seed will germinate and the plant will grow. Now, definitely cycad has got some tremendous economic importance. They are important because they are a food plant having huge amount of sago or seed starch. They are also used in vegetable cake, kaffir bread and poultry feed. The young leaves of Cycas, particularly Cycas circinalis, Cycas pectinata, Cycas revoluta and Cycas rumphei and siamenensis are cooked and used as vegetable in different parts of the world, particularly in parts of Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Philippines, Indonesia and also in Japan. The leaf extract can be used in treatment of rheumatism. The cakes can be prepared from seed kernel, and they are used as a food basically in Sri Lanka, Fiji, Japan and even in India. Sometimes the seed are cut into pieces, dried and ground into a mill, and this particular mill is duffed into cakes, and which are common Cycas cakes. The interior part of the stem of several cycad like Macrozamia is ground boiled in water and used as a cattle feed or feed for poultry birds. Kaffir bread, which is used as a food in some African countries, is prepared from the stem pith, that is the central parenchymatous zone of a cycad plant called Encephalartos. So, we can see that Cycas is very important as a food plant, where different parts of the plant are used as food. Apart from that, there may be some medicinal uses, like the decoction of the seed of Dioon edule is used in Mexico against neuralgic pain. The seeds of Cycas actually can be used in the remedy of bowel complaints and also in emetic and stomach purifier. Particularly in parts of Sri Lanka and Fiji, this is used in treatment of stomach ailments. The Cycas gum, which is produced from the cone or male cone, or sometimes it is produced from the twig, is used to cure malignant ulcer in Africa. The pounded stem of Cycas pectinata is used for hair washing, particularly when the hair root is diseased, and this is a very common trend we see in Assam and parts of northeast India. Ulcerated wound and swollen gland are treated in Cambodia from the bud of Cycas circinalis. Because it is a narcotic, the pollen grain, particularly Cycas rumphei, they are also used as a painkiller. Different Asian countries, the seeds of Cycas are made into a paste, and along with coconut oil, it is used in healing of wound or in sores or boils. The juice of young leaves of Cycas revoluta can be used in curing blood vomit or flatulence. Gum of Cycas, particularly Cycas circinalis, revoluta and rumphei, they also in Dioon, they are used as adhesive, antidote for snake bite and also in malignant ulcer. But when it comes to fiber, the Cycas fiber obtained from Cycas circinalis or revoluta leaves or Microzamia, they can be used as a stuffing material to create pillows and mattresses. Cycas oil, it is an orange yellow oil obtained from the seeds of Cycas revoluta and also Macrozamia, and this is used in place of palm oil, which is really a very good one. And the Macrozamia red lei contain nearly 28% of edible oil. Cycas can be made into decorative material, and these decorative leaves and twigs are used commonly in Japan and other countries, and also they are sometimes exported to the European and American nations. But when we consider Cycas of India, we could see that there are mainly 4 different plants, that is the Cycas rumphei, Cycas bedomi, Cycas circinalis and Cycas pectinata. When seen in naked eye, hardly we can differentiate. The most important structure with which we can differentiate is the structure of the Megasporophyll, and because of this Megasporophyll structure, we can easily identify which Cycas plant is that. And mainly here we find that Cycas is grown as a decorative plant, but very few people know about the medicinal importance of Cycas, and that also this particular oil is edible is not known to us. The Cycas is a good replacement of starch and can be used as a food, and this food can be actually consumed in people who are not getting a regular supply of starch in drought affected areas. Apart from that, the Cycas stem also is woody in nature, and they can be actually used as a potential source of timber, which ultimately can be used in the making of artifacts and small wooden items. But most interestingly, when we see that the Cycas is having the blue-green algae in their root, this blue-green algae or the cyanobacteria is actually helping in nitrogen fixation, as a result of which the Cycas plantation will have a soil which is highly fertile. So what we can see here is that if we grow Cycas plantation, on one hand it is a decorative plant which can be sold at a high price. Not only that, ecologically it is equally important, because this particular soil will become productive and can be used for growing other plants. And at the same time, I have always said that the Cycas is used as a food in different plant parts. The oil and also the resin can be used in adhesive and paint industry. So Cycas is a marvelous plant which has remained in this particular world for more than 240 million years, surviving as a living fossil and continues to serve mankind. So friends, in this particular lecture, I have talked about Cycas, its morphological structure, its distribution, then we talked about its anatomy, the different reproductive phenomena, the Gametophyte, and finally I concluded with their economic importance. Thank you.